as long as it's forward. God send me anywhere, only go with me. Lay any burden on me, only sustain me, and sever any tie in my heart except the tie that binds my heart to yours. If you have men who will only come if they know there's a good road, I don't want them. I want men who will come if there is no road at all. I will go anywhere, provided it is forward. David Livingston, 1813 to 1873.
Okay, thank you so much, Diana. Welcome everybody to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle that Still and Moving Center sponsors every Saturday. And we've been doing so since about a month after the pandemic sent Still and Moving Center entirely online. I think it was in April of 2022 that we started with this so that we would have a chance to stay connected and to stay connected across the waters as well. And we've every year take our themes from the Still and Moving Center Almanac. And this year our theme is the theme of irreversibility, eyes to the stars. And so that path of moving forward is one that, oh, hi, Bob, so nice to have you. It has many different threads weaving through it all through the year. And one of the threads that we're just beginning on this year is the 7 paramitas. And these are the 7 virtues in Buddhism. And so this first virtue that we're going to start on will be the first of ones that will thread through. I think we'll have our last one in November. So we're just embarking on something of a journey forward. And we're so glad that this one, which is the virtue of dana, meaning charity, we can approach from, doesn't have to be the Buddhist tradition. This is a very, very universal virtue. And so we are going to today approach it from the Christian or even Catholic perspective. And we're very fortunate to have Mary Bird, one of our most long-standing and faithful attendees at Gems from the Wisdom Traditions. And somebody who actually started when we first opened Still and Moving Center. And I thought it was really important for us to, as a multicultural center, have times to look at all these different cultures. So Malia and Mary and I, Malia being Mary's daughter and our kumuhula, began this little conversation circle on very multicultural themes. And so Mary and I go way back on looking at these ideas from lots of different perspectives. And so I can tell you that Mary is a Catholic from birth, and that she is someone who definitely walks her talk. It's a lot more than skin deep with Mary. And this virtue of charity, as I was telling my mom before we started today, as soon as I thought of this topic, my mind immediately, my heart immediately went to Mary Bird as the person who should be giving this talk. So Mary, can I let you take it from here?
Oh, mahalo. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, everybody. Just a side note. Today, in 1968, I graduated from high school. So that was what, 56 years ago. Was it that long? Yeah, oh my goodness. But I just thought it was very prophetic, today.
Be continuing your education here.
Exactly. And in many ways, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, because each of you in your own way have been so wonderful and loving. And the theme of charity is pervasive throughout all of your lives that I've known you through the years. So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna just touch on briefly, and then we're gonna talk. So the Catholic Church teaches us that love isn't just a feeling or a thought. It's something that must be lived out in practical ways. And one of the ways that we actively live out our faith is through the 7 corporal works of mercy. And these are concrete actions through which we extend God's compassion and kindness to those in need. So the 7 corporal works of mercy are 7 acts of kindness and charity that are aimed at relieving physical suffering of others. They are: feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, shelter the homeless, visit the sick, visit the imprisoned, and bury the dead. And I know that these are things that at every point in our life we will be exposed to. And the first one that I mentioned, feeding the hungry, we all know that. And I feel especially not disturbed, but when I was still young and I was just working downtown and I was going through some hard times, where the family was financially. And I was walking down towards my office and I was on lunch and I was going to go pick up something quick. And this lady, she's pushing her baby carriage. She's got one kid in the carriage and one child on either side of her. And she says, "Can I have some money? Can you spare anything?" I said, I'm sorry, I don't have enough for you and me. And I'm going, after we walked away, I felt horrible. And so since then that's something that I think we all go through regrets, but we don't let those regrets stop us from going forward. So now I try to make sure I've got something, even if it's a dollar bill, to give to somebody. And a lot of times too, the people that are on the side of the road at, especially at intersections, I keep your window rolled up because it's hot and you got the air conditioning going, and you want to block those people off. I still feel like I don't want to do it, but I've tried to make it a point to roll down my window, and whatever I can, I'll give to them. But it's still, it's something that I battle to be more generous. So that's feeding the hungry. And then give drink to the thirsty. That's kind of grouped together with feeding the hungry. So there have been, I remember people when I worked downtown, this man, I didn't know who he was. I knew nothing about him, but he actually took a kid into McDonald's and gave him, I remember the glass of, or the cup of soda that he got for him. And I thought, you are so awesome. And so we try to emulate those that we see doing good. And then the next one, clothe the naked, which is, we give to goodwill, the things that we can't use anymore, we can give it away. And that's wonderful too. And just recently, I learned that anything that's in your closet and you're not using, that's what you're denying somebody else to be able to have. So I've been trying to clean out my closet, and slowly but surely, little by little. And one of the talks, or one of the sayings that my sister always reminds me, is a quote from CSI. That was the first one that came out, the one in Las Vegas. And one of the questions was, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So, so that's how I am trying to look at helping others by depleting my stores that I'm not using anymore. Why do I have these things? So, one bite at a time to give. And I know we all can give to Salvation Army and Goodwill and stuff, but I want to find people that don't have to pay for things. My church does have food drives and clothing drives, so that the youth in our church will do that. And I have friends who will every week, every weekend, or every month, once a weekend, Sunday or Saturday, they will go out to Ala Moana Beach Park or to Kaka'ako Beach Park, which is a beach right in Honolulu town, close to the Still and Moving Center, and they will feed people, and they will feed up to 7,500 people a time. And a lot of this was before the pandemic, so there's a lot more need now. Okay, so and it comes to sheltering the homeless. And many of us, we're not going to bring people into our home, but that goes along with clothing the naked, because we see so many people just on the side of the road. They have lean-tos or cart tarps just by a fence that they've hooked up, and so we can still help them out. And then we can visit the sick and visit the imprisoned. And that was nothing. I to me, the saints of our day are doctors and nurses, and the people who take care of those who are sick. And when it comes to the imprisoned, I've never worked in prison ministry, but I know a number of people who have, and it's a very rewarding practice to be able to do, because you can see how it affects people. You can see people at their lowest and help them, even if it's just a kind word, pat on the back, just sit there and commiserate with them, let them talk. Some people, they just need somebody to listen to them. So that's what you do when you visit the sick and you visit the imprisoned. And then this last one is bury the dead. And it doesn't seem like it really relates to us all the time, but it is rooted in the respect for human dignity. And providing a burial, proper burial, is a final act of respect and love for the human person. So I thought that's interesting, because I mean, we do go to funeral services, we do honor those who have died. In the Catholic Church, we pray for the souls in purgatory. Those are souls who aren't able to get to heaven just yet. We have November is month dedicated to the remembrance of the dead. We have wonderful festivals, the Mexican festival, the Day of the Dead. It's a wonderful celebration. It's so colorful. It's not a drab time. It's a time when we remember specifically all of our those who have gone before us, and those, to remember them. So it's just a neat time. And then looking at charity in modern times, we've got food banks, we help out at hospitals, homeless shelters. There's so much need. I think it's great that we do have organizations that will specifically have a time set aside to remind people to help others, because we do get all bogged down in our daily activities and in our families, in our work. And it's a good reminder, because it doesn't cost much relatively. We live in the most wealthy country in the world, and we have surplus we can give. So the 7 corporal works of mercy aren't just a checklist of good deeds, but our guide to living a life rooted in love and compassion. By engaging in these acts, we are not only aiding our fellow human beings, but we're serving Christ himself. St. John of the Cross said, "At the end of our life, we shall all be judged by charity, how much we loved." And I did have the note that was sent out with this invitation, that love, or rather faith without works, is empty, and works without faith is dead. So it's an entire thing. And then I have different groups that I listen to, and one of them was talking about words do not take form until they are spoken, but to have real meaning, words must be put into action. And then I thought of the old saying, talk is cheap, you know, put your money where your mouth is, put your actions where it'll do some good to others, not just ourselves. In the Catholic Church, we honor people who have done wonderful works of mercy, charity, and we call them saints. But in the Catholic Church, every person who's baptized is a saint. We're saints in the making. So we all have to, we have to learn what we're supposed to do and why we do things. And at the end of our lives, we want to be told, you did good. You did good. So some of the prominent saints in the Catholic Church, especially for doing charity, the most recent one is Saint Teresa of Calcutta. And she was, there's so many books about her and what she said, how we should live. And it's just amazing. And then here in Hawaii, we have been blessed to have 2 saints, Father Damien and Saint Marianne Cope. And both of them served the lepers in Kalaupapa on the island of Molokai. And we have a 3rd one whose name is Joseph Dutton. And he's an interesting one because he wasn't Catholic. He was a soldier in the Civil War. And after the Civil War, he went through many trials. He was an alcoholic. He divorced his wife. He left, and he just felt that there was something more. And for some reason, he came to Hawaii, and he served the lepers on Molokai. And so we are in the process of trying to get him beatified, which means to be blessed, and then eventually canonized to be a saint. And I know that there are many, many people throughout the world and throughout all of our communities that we can identify as being people who just give from the heart. And I'd strive to challenge each of us to just think about that. We all have different lives, and we all are in different stages of our lives. And when you can't do physical stuff, there's something else you can do. And to conclude, I just want to say, if you can't do anything, then say a prayer for somebody, because you don't know what they're going through. And it doesn't matter. God knows, and he will take care. Amen.
Oh, thank you so much, Mary. Actually, that's not something I've ever heard of, not having grown up in the Catholic Church, the 7 corporeal works of mercy. Corporal, 7
Corporal.
corporal works of
Corporal means body.
yes, yes. So thank you for sharing something at least that I have never heard of, and maybe some others might not have either. You know, before we go much farther, I was wondering if Bob, from you know, a very long practice of the Buddhist tradition, would you like to say something about this virtue of dana from a Buddhist perspective?
Um, I guess I could. When I heard about this talk, though, I actually thought of a related monotheistic tradition, the Jewish response. And it fits very nicely, I think, with what was just said. One of the great teachers of Catholicism is Aquinas. And Aquinas, one of his teachers in Judaism was Maimonides. And Maimonides also studied Islam, Averroes. And Maimonides is probably, in the Jewish tradition, one of the great theorists. And he actually has a book called Ramdan, which has within it what's called the 8-level hierarchy of tzedakah. Tzedakah is the Jewish word for charity, but it means a little different than charity. It actually is the ethical obligation that God gives all that believe in him to do what is just and right. So you're supposed to do that. And that 8-fold hierarchy is one that I've always been very impressed with. So I'd like to share that if I could. Okay, the highest level of giving, top of the ladder, is this: give such that the recipient will become independent. In other words, you give him something that allows him to no longer be dependent, whatever that is. Maimonides is famous for, I think, probably the first one to say this, although you probably heard it from many other people. Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. So the highest form is to give someone such that they will never have to ask again. They're no longer poor. Maybe it's giving them an education, teaching them how to do something. So that's the highest form of giving. And the other 7 levels are just very subtle and I think interesting. The 7th is to give to the poor, not knowing the recipient. In other words, you give to the poor, but you don't actually know the person who is eventually going to benefit. The next lowest is to know the person that you're giving to, but the person that receives it does not know it comes from you. So we're getting into very subtle things about how much ego goes into things. Know the person to whom you give, but the receiver does not know the giver. The next lowest, giver does not know the receiver, but the poor knows the giver. And so it's a little subtle, but you're not knowing
that one again.
Well, you don't know the person you're giving to. So you're giving out to, say, the church. But the church does know the people who gave, and they would be able to recognize. So it's a little tricky. And part of this is how you're giving through other mechanisms. And then it starts getting personal. The next lowest is to put it into the hand of the person who is poor before being asked. That's very similar to what Mary was saying, seeing someone on the street putting a hand out and you give it to them. But that, of course, would be after you're being asked, which is the next lower one. if you give before you come up on them and you're actually giving before they have a chance to ask you, that's a little higher than giving after. And the last two I really love, to give inadequately. They ask for $1 and you give them a quarter, but you do it gladly and with a smile. And so, that gladness is part of the gift as well. You could give more, but you gave what you gave and you smile at them. You do it with a smile. And the lowest form of giving is to give unwillingly. And I don't know how to give an example of that. You have to look in your own heart to think, have you ever given but unwillingly? And it might be to someone really close to you. It might be a family member where you gave something and you didn't really want to, but you gave. And so anyway, Maimonides kind of works that through. And I think it's part of the idea of responding to God's expectation that we have an obligation to give to the poor. I think the difference between Judaism and Christianity to some extent is the element of pride that comes in. For Christianity, that element of pride becomes a real sticking point. And Maimonides doesn't look too much at it. He just says, put yourself in a context where just people don't even know, and therefore you're not going to become, famous for giving and things like that. But it is a tricky kind of aspect. Anyway, I sort of like that element. And elsewhere in the Ramdan, Maimonides talks about 5 steps of what he calls toxic charity. And the first one isn't toxic too much at all. Give once and you create appreciation. But creating that appreciation does have a little edge to it. Then he says, give twice, you create anticipation. Ooh, I like that. A person came by yesterday and gave to me. Now he's going to give to me again. There's an anticipation that this is a generous person. Give 3 times and you create expectation. Give 4 times and you create entitlement. Give 5 times and you create dependency. And that's sort of the flip side of what Maimonides said is the highest form of giving is to give in such a way the person will never need to be dependent again, will be completely independent. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share. And I thought it would complement what Mary had talked about from the Christian tradition with a very related Jewish tradition. And I can talk about Dana later, but Dana is a little bit different tradition. And so we'd have to bring up some new ideas, I think.
I see, yeah. Well, that does seem extremely complementary. And that point of giving 5 times till you get that someone has become dependent. Yeah. Where you're actually doing a disservice through what you would initially consider to be charity.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I mean, Maimonides says the highest form of charity is to go in the opposite direction of dependency. It's to make the person able to fend for themselves, to handle for themselves. That may require money, but it may require knowledge. Because Maimonides is famous for saying the most important resource, the most important thing you can have is knowledge. There's no greater wealth than knowledge.
I really appreciate all the sharing. I think it's very, it opens our minds to how we give and to make us think about that. And I think it's really important. What came up for me was how do we give of our time, a smile, a kindness, a compassion, and not just the physical things that we give of food and clothing, but how do we give of our heart? Sometimes I was a hospital chaplain for a while, and so it would be just going in the room and sitting with somebody, and not just that they were sick, but even smiling at the person that's your cashier, or being kind to the person that's delivering food to you. And there's something around a charity of heart or a charity of spirit that I think is important part of charity that we don't think about very often. And that it doesn't necessarily, yes, I think we need to give our clothes and the money and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, how do we give of our heart? And it may be just even in our family, taking time to really listen to someone, or to care for them, or to just let them know we're here. And so that's kind of what I was thinking about, is a different level of presence and awareness and love that we can give, that is different than the physical giving. The physical giving, I think, is really important, but we can do these little acts of kindness and respect and love in every part of our life. Appreciation. I think we don't appreciate things enough. And maybe that's not seen as charity, but I think it's really seen as giving that love and compassion you were talking about, Mary. And just being present with somebody. So that's what I was thinking about.
Wonderful. No, that's so true. And we, like Bob says, these things aren't limited to one particular religion or thought, and it just helps us to expand our 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 circle of love. And thank you. That's great.
I wonder whether that giving of the heart, for example, with our presence, is a lot less likely to become that kind of toxic giving.
Mhm. Along with what Diana said, one thing you can give is hope. And if you have the opportunity to actually have a little bit of conversation, you can ask the person, well, what is it you'd really like to do? And maybe they have a dream that they've kind of don't have much hope for. But if you let them speak as to what they truly want, I mean, maybe it's to become in some way connected with music or whatever. If you listen to that and you don't promise anything, because you're not in a position to promise, um, particularly if it's a kind of a one-time encounter, but then they have a little bit of a moment to experience that hope, and maybe it will give them a little bit of a boost, so they'll maybe try harder to something but just to let them speak to what they truly want as something that's good. And I think that's there's a lot of charity in that.
Mhm. Thank you. I was thinking when you were talking about um, giving hope, I was thinking about right now, Hawaii is part of the FestPAC, the Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture. Excuse me. And this involves the peoples throughout the Pacific. And if you aren't familiar with it, there's 27 or 28 nations, island communities that have arrived on Oahu to share their culture and their arts. And one of the keynote speakers at the opening ceremonies, when the canoes actually landed in Kaneohe Bay, was Nainoa Thompson, who is a navigator. He learned from Mau Piailug, who was from the island of Sarawak in Micronesia, who knew how to navigate by the stars and the waves, the wind, the birds, all the animals and things. And Nainoa commented that the power of communities when they are united is powerful. And we are a community, and we get strength, we get ideas, we get power from each of the people in our community. We have a number of communities. This is one small community. And the realization that the ideas that we share, the ideas that we receive, that we can blossom in our minds and in our hearts, it's tremendous. And I thank you all for sharing.
Renee? You want to share?
Yeah, I really love what Diana said, and I think that's what it was coming to my mind to, hear Mary and also hear Bob. It's about, giving from our heart and our soul. And there is this quote by Mother Teresa that says, "It's not how much we give, but how much love we put into giving." So I think it's a balance, right? Like people that like homeless or other people, they're not everybody is going to need that emotional giving, right? Some needs more of that material support, you being there for them, providing clothes, providing money, food. And some other people will need more of that spiritual things. It's about finding the balance and always being willing to give, and that giving comes from a place of love. As long as it comes from your heart, whatever giving we're doing, whatever act of giving, I think is good. And yeah, we should try to at least every day. I don't know. I love, like, when I go grab a coffee or when I go to the grocery store, I'm always get to the cashier. I'm like, "Hello, how are you?" Because that person been there for so many hours and they probably deal with so many upset customers, and just me smiling and showing up and, "Oh, what time you get off? You're gonna get out here soon." That gives them hope. That gives them joy. Like, there are good people out there, people that are kind. And I cannot give my money to all the homeless because sadly there's so many, but if it touches my heart, or like if I have some cash that day, I will try sometimes to, give what I have. So it's about finding the balance. And I think there is also giving not to other people, but like giving to the land, right? Like there's so many ways of giving that is not only person to person. It's like taking care of our land, taking care of our homes and things like that. I don't know. I think it's such a like big, beautiful topic to think about in so many different ways.
We're stewards of the world. One of the other people that spoke at the opening at the Stan Sheriff Center talked about we're not little tiny islands in a big ocean. We are the caretakers of that ocean. And by extension, we are caretakers of our world. So yeah, I can't go out and clean clean the beaches and stuff, but I can certainly be recycling in my home. I can separate my trash. I can try to have some kind of a home garden, something that doesn't require me having to go buy things. So thank you, Sharoni. That's a great contribution.
Bob, I'm curious about the Danya of Buddhism. You spoke about Judaism and that there was some differences, and I don't know if you could just speak to that. I just find that interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to approach it, but I'll approach it in this way. I think the paramitas are meant to be part of how you participate in the world, how you walk the bodhisattva's path. And generally speaking, especially in Zen, my own tradition, we have sort of two aspects: the aspect of wisdom, Manjushri's sword, where we actually see how sharp that sword is to cut away delusion, to cut away any sense of ego. And then compassion or love, which has been beautifully expressed here today. But those things can't be separated. And I think that's what, to some extent, I think what Maimonides is saying, that there's a trap in giving, and that's why he's really pushing to give anonymously, so that, I don't know who I'm actually eventually going to be giving, and they don't know me and can't say, oh, what a wonderful person that person is. And I think that's really what dana means in the Buddhist tradition. That in a sense, we talk, and actually it's Catholic too. Gabriel Marcel, the Christian existentialist, says there's being and having. And he really wants to say being is like love, is like expressing that. Having is, I have more than I need and I can give to someone else who doesn't have. And there's so many traps built into that language, I, him, her, it, give. All those things are actions that sort of separate me from what I think Mary means by love, of simply giving from the heart, as was said. And that's, I think, what the Bodhisattva path is really about. We don't have anything in this world. We don't come in with anything. We don't leave with anything. It's not what I have and how I can give it to someone. It's really somehow the expression of generosity. And it's a somewhat unrelated aspect, but I think of this in terms of the war and fighting that's going on now, almost to the hatred of, people have accused Israel of genocide in Gaza. And that's an open question whether it is physically genocide, but genocide is the absence of treating another person as a human being, respect and dignity that person has, the universal doctrine of human rights. And that gets at what Maimonides was saying. God expects us to do what is just and right. And that means you have to treat every other person as a human being. I mean, Jesus said, you didn't give me food when I came amongst you. And they said, well, yeah, I don't remember seeing you. And they said, well, if the least of you didn't give to, then you didn't give to me. If you gave to anyone, you gave to me. And so it's a tricky kind of thing. It's this relationships that we have, not because we have stuff that other people don't have, but that we're interconnected. And I don't know, that's a very long way of talking about dana in Buddhism, but I think that's the heart of what it is. And the same thing with right speech, not harming other people. All of them work the same kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I was wondering why it is that many times people do not want to be recipients of charity. And maybe it's related to this idea that sometimes the greatest gift that we can give is to be a receiver. It feels so good to be able to give to someone. But if nobody wants it, you don't get to be a giver. So,
Well, and feeling good about it can be very, very close to feeling superior to the person you're giving. I'm giving to someone who doesn't have what it takes. Maybe they don't have the this, I got my stuff because, well, I deserve to get it and I worked hard for it. Uh, the implication being they haven't the means to get things and they haven't worked hard enough. And so there's Maimonides is very attentive to, not knowing the person and being able to label them in any way and not knowing yourself, that I don't know the person I'm giving to and all of that. And nobody knows that I gave. That's a tricky thing. I mean, because most of the time, if you give a big gift, immediately you get response. Said, "Wow, thank you very much." And you're a big man in the church, and you're a big man in the sangha, and you are someone who is extremely generous. What a wonderful way of being, and it's like a coat you can put on. But the worst form of treating another person, I think, is to pity them or to categorize them as someone who is maybe inherently uneasy. They're lazy. They're shiftless. I mean, all the attributes of what people say about the poor or the homeless, or and all the conditions that they have that are very complicated around drugs or around whatever things we have about them socially. So there's a lot of strings attached to giving that can make us feel very superior. I mean, I think that's one end of the question.
I think that pride has a lot to do with the reluctance to receive. I just remember even growing up, if there was somebody that the family thought was we label. It's just one of the things that humans do. We label people, we label ourselves, we judge ourselves, and I could have done better. I should have done better. Why didn't I do better? I think, especially with people who have, I don't personally know, but people who have become addicted to drugs and alcohol, a lot of times I will look at them and say, why can't they get better? Why can't they just say no? And as I have found with people who suffer from anxiety, it's nothing they can control. And so they do need help. They do need medications and stuff. And then trying to get off of them, it's a whole nother battle. And I wasn't aware of that. So it's a wake up call. It's something to help us not judge or to think twice. I mean, think 5 times. Why am I thinking this? Am I better than them? No, I'm not. Like Bob said, we come into this world with nothing, we leave with nothing. And we leave all that crap that we've accumulated to our families to have to go through it. And but yep, it's a human condition, and we have our values that we have gotten from our families, from our different religious leanings, from the people that we meet every day. We learn how to be better. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we have to just love one another, and bringing up that, yeah, Jesus did say, if you gave something to the least of the people, you gave it to me. And there was I did see in the Old Testament, in the book of Isaiah, he exhorts us, or he tells us, share our bread with the hungry, bring the homeless into our homes, and clothe the naked. So this is from the Old Testament, and that, it's throughout history. And thinking, if we think back to those who were cavemen, how can we imagine what they would do? Does everybody remember the movie 1 BC with Raquel Welch? One group were fisher people, and they shared everything. And then the other group were hunters, and they lived because if they hunted a mammoth, they could feed their families, but then they'd have to go hunt again. And so it was a different kind of thinking. Whereas the Raquel Welch people, they shared everything. And the other group, they took. So yeah, it's something that we learn, and hopefully we get better. Amen.
I was just thinking about what you said, Renee, about do we receive? Why don't people receive? And I think a lot of what for me it's easier to give than to receive. And yet there is such a gift that we give that we give to the giver when we receive it. And I just, even all of us, it's like we're givers, but how do we receive when someone wants to give to us? And oh, no, let me do it for you. Or whether I'm not worthy, or whether we think by giving we're going to be loved, or subtly that we've learned to let go of our needs so that we could take care of others, so we don't take care of ourselves. And so looking at that receiving of how do we receive love from ourselves, or in ourselves, and how do we receive love from others, or giving, receive. And that people, I think part of it's pride, but part of it is people are living, it depends upon where it's coming from in the heart. And I think learning to receive and feeling God's love and God's presence, and then coming from abundance. I say, if your heart is empty, you give out of need because you want to be loved and cared for. If we have a full heart and we've taken care of ourselves, we give out of abundance of love. And so I think there's a difference there of that receiving point of all of us is really important. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, Renee, because I thought that was a really important point.
As you were speaking, I was remembering, oh, yeah, part of my history is coming out of the Midwest too. And in the Midwest, there's a sense where receiving something is an immediate obligation. I receive a birthday present, I've got to give you a birthday present. I receive a wedding present, I've got to give you a wedding present. I receive a Christmas card, you're on my list for Christmas cards. And that can, I know there's kind of, and even locally, I think there's that sense of, well, you've given me, now I owe you to give you. And that's the opposite of what you're talking about, is being given with an open heart. You're actually got an open pad to make sure you put down your obligations, and it's not just you, but your whole family. And that's again a trap of this giving and having, that somehow the ledger should match up eventually, and there's no ledger. There's all this stuff is irrelevant, and yet possessions, more possessions, more possessed. That's a common New Age saying, but it makes sense. You've got a lot of stuff, the stuff possesses you. It's very tricky in terms of having as opposed to being. And that's where, I think we get trapped. And the language works that way, especially English. It allows us to separate into dualism. I give you something. There's three objects there: the gift, the recipient, and the giver. None of which really exists.
Mhm.
So can I go back to this question I had before? Is if we are giving from the heart, not object things. Well, we can give things from the heart too. However, if we are giving in a non-material way, for example, with our presence, with our time, with our patience sometimes, for example, are we less likely to, commit that error of, eventually giving so much that we've made somebody dependent? Are we less likely to overgive?
Could you repeat your question in a slightly different way?
Sure. I'm not even sure. Okay, yes, I can. If we're not giving materially, but we're giving non-materially with our care, our attention to someone, etc., are we less likely to be making them dependent than if we're giving all these things? So that eventually they come to expect them and rely upon these things that we're giving. I think maybe the answer to my question is no, because we can be,
Yeah.
for example, caring for somebody in such a way that we end up making them dependent upon us for our caretaking.
Yeah.
So that doesn't actually, it's not really true that would make the giving have less of a potentially toxic effect.
Well,
I go ahead.
to what extent does the giving create the duality? In other words, I have a certain identity and you have a certain identity. What am I giving you? I mean, how am I connected to you in such a way that, as Maimonides said, can I give you something that actually empowers you? I mean, what is it I'm giving you? If I'm giving you money, okay, that's what you're asking for on the street, for example, then we've reciprocated, that is generosity. But it isn't helping me or the person. Somehow there's something missing. I'm giving something. I'm giving what is needed to be given. That means I know what it is that's truly needed. So if somebody is asking for something, what are they really asking for? What do they need? And maybe they don't even know. It was interesting when Mary talked about the different forms of charity. She talked about going into the prisons. Well, what are you giving them? You can't give them physical things usually. I mean, they usually say don't do that, and that's a verboten thing. So what is it you're giving them? Perhaps time. Maybe you're teaching them to meditate. Maybe you're teaching them how to pray. And what is that? What is it you're giving that somehow allows them to not build up dependency, but to be independent, to be fully what they can be? That puts a lot of obligation on you to know what it is about the other person enough to give, and enough about yourself to know that there aren't any strings attached. I mean, that to me is probably as important as what it is you're giving. I mean, they're all very much connected. They all mean that you have wisdom to a certain extent about yourself, about the person, and what would truly allow them to be independent, to be, feed them for a lifetime or give them what they need. And going into the prison, for example, teaching them to meditate may be a wonderful gift to them, or teaching them to pray or to read the Bible or even to read. All of those are things that might really help them. I don't know. It's not as obvious as just giving $1 to someone who's asked for it.
I think we're talking about creating expectations, which we may not be able to prevent. I'm going to call you every 2 weeks to see how you're doing, and so the person begins to see that as an expectation, and it can lead to a kind of a false duty, so to speak. So I'm not offering, I mean, that is a problem, and one has to figure out something about it, how to not do that. One thing we haven't brought in, well, you have actually, but there is the law of karma, and we have found that if you're kind of doing things with the right motive and to the right extent and whatever, there will be not just a beginning and a middle, but there'll be a time when somehow what you're doing isn't needed. And it may be that the other person realizes that they don't need that help anymore or something like that. But we're not just, it's not just ourselves, it's ourselves in a context or a situation. Um, and maybe there's someone else who comes along who has something fresh and better to offer a person. I'm just throwing those things out because it is it can become a very complicated situation. And we're not probably wise enough to prevent some difficulties in a process or relationship. So one has to learn, and but one has to everything in moderation. I love that Buddhist idea.
Mm. Yeah, that's a saving grace in many circumstances. Oh, my goodness. It's already past 4.
You're also
Oh,
terrific. We're a
yeah,
great group.
we are a great group. Mom, let me call on you. Can you, let's see, I think you're muted.
I just wanted to say I've listened very carefully to all of you and really enjoyed what everyone had to say. And don't think I disagreed with anything that was being said. My thought was I don't know how they can measure generosity at all. I always think, well, what do studies say and on this topic? And I was thinking, well, church attendance in this let's just say this country has declined for a long time and is at the lowest point I think that it has been that I know about. And I wonder how that compares with the amount of generosity. But what is generosity and giving it? It's not a thing that I think is measurable over a big society like this. It seems to me, in my small little world here, that people are very generous. I don't know that they've been more or less generous because of not being churchgoers. And so I was thinking, well, if that was true, what's responsible for our still wanting to be generous and helping other people? It just, I don't know. That was my thought. How does it come about if people aren't going to church, and is it true that we're as generous a society as we've been in the past? I don't know.
Good question. Yeah, I don't know. I do feel, however, that everyone here participating today has been really generous in their sharing, really extending ideas and from the heart and mind that show that these are things that on one level they seem so clear and straightforward. Seems as though giving is probably the primary virtue in most religions and most philosophies. To be able to give is huge and a first step on the path to becoming a more selfless and more I would say a more universal person. And yet from the questions and comments that people have made, it's actually not that easy. And each of us have struggled in ways of knowing, what was the right thing to give? Is it right to give in this context? Is it not? Is it actually doing more harm than good? It's actually not that easy. So I think it's a topic that at the outset seems very simple. And then because of the great deal of thought and effort, I think in your own personal lives that you've made, to be givers, or in Bob's case, to take oneself out of the equation and just be a person. Be, gosh, it's hard in English language to leave nouns and things out, but to give, it's difficult to give, and yet I feel that everyone has shown different ways that we can in our lives enact this very important principle of giving, and particularly Mary, in her words today and the examples that she gave, just touched a little bit on what she in her personal life does as someone who is living giving. So thank you so much, Mary. We all really appreciate what you have given us today. I want to mention that next week we're going to have someone who hasn't been with us before. His name is Ryan Quirk, and those of us who know Kurt Gradine should know that Ryan is a young man in college who just kind of found Kirk as somebody, I think, who had a room behind his house, a little cottage behind his house for rent, and they've ended up being tremendous friends. He's really a brilliant young man. I think he's about 19 years old, and he's already published a book. He's so knowledgeable in so many different fields of religion and philosophy, and many other things as well. And he's going to speak from a yogic tradition on our dual nature, and so I think it will be nice for us to have somebody but besides Sharoneh, who's under 60 years of age, with us in next week's meeting. And I really want to thank all of you once again, and Mary most of all. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Love you guys. Have a great
Thank you, Mary.
weekend.
Blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you, Mary. Bye-bye.
Allah.
That was wonderful, Mary.
Oh, bless you.
I don't know why you would feel nervous.
Oh,
You were wonderful.
there's so much, like Bob says, when the subject is it's magnanimous. It's just all there. It's wonderful. Yeah, but
Yeah.
we're a mutual admiration society. We all love each other, and we appreciate each other. So
Yeah. Well, Bob, you came especially prepared to help us out with this
thank you,
conversation.
Oh,
Bob. Yes.
well, a little, yeah. But it's interesting. We were talking a little bit about church declining, and that may be affecting how generous we can be. But when de Tocqueville looked at the United States under democracy, he said, it's amazing how much secular generosity is in America. He said, there's 1,000 points of light, people giving out. George W. Bush quoted that. But we have a generosity of giving to the poor, giving to those in need, that's secular as well as religious. I mean, it's part of being a good citizen is also to see who needs and who is struggling. I mean, in a sense, what families don't have enough food to eat for their children. I mean, that's something that we know is out there, but we may not actually see it because it's so close, it's so far away from our immediate neighborhood. But de Tocqueville was very impressed that there were such giving societies, that we give just goodwill. We just keep throwing things out there, and they find their way back to people who need them. We donate so many things, so that's I think part of it too, is that what kind of society do we want to live in? What kind of group? It's a Sangha relation, but it's also a political, social situation.
Mhm.
But so many things to think about.
It's fun.
That's one of the most hopeful things I've heard in a long time, Bob.
It
I
is.
forgot that de Tocqueville had.
Yeah, it's
and-
not something we see in the newspapers very often now, but it's still there. I mean, every
It
once
is
in a while you
still there.
see the people who are helping in Gaza, you know, and that's still something to, you got to look for it to see it, and you got to look past a lot of things to be able to see it too.
Mm.
Um,
Mom?
I just wanted to say that we've allowed it also to be giving to be institutionalized more than in the past, so that, you know, like today, unless the state prefers not to participate, school children get 3 meals a day at school and get meals during the summer. Schools provide clothing, you know, the schools provide so much, and that's good too. That doesn't, I
yeah,
don't, anybody's giving less because the schools or institutions are giving more. I think it's wonderful that the institutions are also doing it.
yeah. It takes a village. I mean, it takes all of us and all our groups. I mean, you know, sometimes we give individually, sometimes we give through a group, but all of that probably is received. You know, and like you say, it may be something that really helps people. That, you know, if they didn't have that free food in the morning, they wouldn't be eating, and then they wouldn't be learning very much because you can't learn on an empty stomach. Um, that's really empty. You know,
Yeah.
so
It-
it's connected.
I think it's really interesting that as an institution, for instance, you know, one of the reasons for giving 3 meals a day to kids is because they don't want the stigma of kids getting free meals.
Hmm.
You know, kids didn't want to, they didn't want it known that, oh, they were on a free meal ticket or something.
Yeah.
And, so institutions are realizing that and allowing it to be available to everybody, so that, you know, the receivers can receive it without any stigma attached. And I think that's
Yeah.
good.
I think it's critical. I mean, if you're really going to give, then the person has to be able to receive it as lovingly as it was given. If there's a barrier in having that happen, the barrier should be taken away. I think you're exactly right. There's lots of barriers out there.
Yep, there's good things. Thank you again, Mary. We got it.
Oh, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Carolyn. Thank you all.
Thank
Nancy,
Thank
it's
you
great
all.
to see you.
Bye bye.
Bye.